the Prime Minister announced a cabinet reshuffle today, which had Clare O'Neil and Andrew Giles moved on from the Home Affairs and immigration portfolios. Tony Burke's been given immigration, cybersecurity and home affairs. He'll also continue as the Arts Minister. O'Neil will be moved to the housing portfolio and Giles will replace outgoing Skills and Training Minister Brendan O'Connor. Anthony Albanese has also appointed NT Senator Malarndirri McCarthy to replace Linda Burney as Indigenous Australians Minister. Now, the PM insisted that despite the changes, his government was stable.
What you do when there's a reshuffle is that there is a change that then has a knock-on effect. The fact is that we have been a very stable government.
I mean, talk about failing upwards. They put Clare O'Neil in charge of housing. Now, if we have one problem in this country right now, it's a housing shortage, and they've gone, we know exactly the minister for the job.
Look, that's true, but I think it is still seen as a demotion to move her out of Home Affairs and into housing. It's seen as a lesser role. And it's very clear there's an election looming because they couldn't keep Clare O'Neil and Andrew Giles after that absolute failure with the way that the High Court affair was handled, all these detainees being let out into the community, allowed to reoffend, not the right amount of, or really any kind of monitoring happening, proper monitoring happening, which allowed those crimes to then happen, allegedly. But, you know, yes, is she going to be able to handle housing when she couldn't handle home affairs? That's a good question. We certainly have a housing crisis. The problem is she's shown she's not willing to take questions from the media when the going gets tough. So I guess we won't be able to really ask her about it directly.
We're correct. And Andrew Giles, Kel, I mean, you know, he's still in the ministry. He should be gone.
And that's the key to it all. I mean, he's been made the Minister for Skills and Training in the hope that he'll finally develop some. That's what they're hoping. But you've got to say why he's shown that he can't do the job. He can't do the basic job. So why has he still got a job? Now, there is something wrong. I presume, and I'd like to hear Joe, who knows the inside gossip from the Labor Party, on this, because my understanding is that Albanese's hands are tied by the fact that the cabinet positions and the outer ministry positions have to be divided up according to factions and according to states, which means he can't actually do anything sensible. If he was a Liberal Prime Minister, Giles would be on the back bench. Because he's not a Liberal Prime Minister, because he's run by this collective socialist nutcase, then we're stuck with rules that mean we are stuck with Andrew Giles ruining another area of government activity. Joe, what are the rules?
It is broadly what you said. So the factions put forward who they want in the cabinet or the ministry, and because it's in and out of ministry, obviously, so not all ministers are cabinet ministers, which will get us to housing very shortly, and then the leader just allocates the portfolio. So the leader decides what they're ministers of, but the factions basically decide whether they're ministers or not. There was an exception to that, which was the first Rudd ministry, where he did a captain's pick for the lot. But he only really had a mandate for that because A, he didn't really have any factional authority anyway, which is why he got rolled a couple of years later, and B, he just won in such a massive landslide. He demanded the right to appoint his own cabinet, and they gave it to him. The interesting thing here is, firstly, it's kind of meant to be the best of both worlds, where they can say, oh no one's been demoted, it's all fine, while getting rid of Andrew Giles in particular, and to a lesser extent Clare O'Neil, out of their portfolios, which they absolutely had to do. It's clearly not a desperate move, because if it was a desperate move, it would have been made when it would have had more political impact. Like, Giles should have gone a long time ago. I think everyone agrees that. But Albanese was very loyal. The reason why Giles is still there is Giles does the numbers for him and runs the sort of left faction for him in Victoria. The left faction is also actually, believe it or not, split between two different sub-factions, the soft left and the hard left faction, which you can read my column about tomorrow, but that's another story altogether. Albanese is the head of what is nominally the hard left faction, but the hard left is actually softer than the soft left. The soft left is the sub-faction of the CFMEU, and we all know how soft and gentle and caring they are on building sites right across Australia. So there's that. So Giles and Albo have some kind of bond that I've never understood. I went to uni with Andrew Giles. We, and a mate of mine it was actually, basically set up the entire left political machine there to keep Andrew Giles away from the student union presidency. I had no idea why at the time. I was just along for the ride. But even dating back to student politics, he's had a reputation for not being particularly effectual. Anyway, so he's been moved sideways. But he's been moved to a portfolio that no one's ever heard of. I mean, what's Brendan O'Connor done in the last 3 years?
Yeah.
Nobody knows. No one's like, who's the Skills Minister of Australia? You could put a gun to the biggest political nut's head and they wouldn't be able to tell you. The interesting one is Clare O'Neil. Now, I think Clare O'Neil is to some extent unfairly been tangled up in Giles's screw-ups, it would seem, although, of course, the buck stops with her because she is the senior minister. Now, she has been moved to housing, which is very much a demotion because housing in the last Labor government that was around wasn't even in cabinet. This was where there's an out-of-ministry portfolio where my dear friend, where is she? Tanya Plibersek cut her teeth and made a really good name for herself. Contrast that to the current housing minister in the middle of a current crisis. Again, you wouldn't be able to name her with a gun to her head. So what he's done is a bit like...
Because it's mainly a state issue at the end of the day.
That's right. But now because for the first time there is a real genuine housing crisis that's just brutalising everyone, it's taken on this new... So, the disability portfolio would have been seen as a real demotion and, it once was. And that's where Rudd put Bill Shorten. But now, of course, with the NDIS, it's something you want. So what I think, I don't know, but I'm just guessing because I read people's minds these days, is what you do is you take a really big sort of senior minister with a big senior ego and you stuff him in a sort of small but really important crisis area or portfolio that you need to get fixed. And then they go like Shorten has done, so, I'll show you. I'm going to make this the best bloody portfolio ever seen. I'll fix the effing housing crisis.
A bit of reverse psychology.
That's right. And so they do that. And that's what Shorten's been really good at doing in the NDIS.
Yeah.
And I reckon that's what O'Neil has been charged with doing. And so to prove that it's not a demotion and to prove that she is, because, she was Great White Hope and she's done other good stuff in Home Affairs. To prove her mettle, she has to fix the housing crisis. Yeah. So she's got a real dog in the fight. The previous minister, again, did they even work with it?
Correct.
It's obvious they're taking it seriously because if they didn't care about housing, they would have given it to Chris Bowen.
Oh, God. Time will tell on that one.